For today's lesson, our focus standard comes from Grade 7, Number Systems, Standard 2C. Apply properties of operations as strategies to multiply and divide rational numbers. Our topic comes from multiplying and dividing integers, developing the rules from fact families. Our essential question is, how can we use multiplication and division fact families to determine the rules with integers? So please take a moment pausing the video if you need to copy the topic and the essential question into your header, along with today's date, set up your question column and your note column, and resume the video when you're ready to begin. So I'd like to start off today talking about a few multiplication patterns that we have discussed in class and just kind of finalize and have a place to think about those. So one thing that we've noticed is that there's definitely a difference when multiplying with the same sign versus different signs. And what we found is if we're multiplying the same sign, either two positives or two negatives, the product, meaning the answer to a multiplication problem, is always positive. On the other hand, if the signs are different, whether it be a positive times a negative or vice versa, a negative times a positive, the product has always been negative. So these are some patterns and some rules that we have found and discussed in class. And so now today we're going to look at some multiplication and division fact families to see if we can figure out more about the division patterns and the division rules. So let's look at our first fact family. So if we look at the numbers -6, 8, and -8, we want to look at the multiplication and division fact family. Here's what I mean by that. We know that -6 times 8 equals a -48. This falls under the different signs pattern for multiplication. We also know then that a +8 times a -6, just reversing those factors, also equals a -48. So there are the two multiplication facts of this family. What happens when we reverse that and we do division? So we can think about this as backtracking with the first problem. If we start with -48 and we divide by a +8, what does the answer or the quotient have to be? Well, if we're using backtracking, the -48 divided by 8 has to equal -6. So then what about the opposite division fact? If we have -48 divided by -6, what does that equal? Well, it's really this problem right here in reverse. -48 divided by a -6 would have to equal 8 if the rules about inverse operation hold true. So here we've created the four facts of the multiplication and division fact family for -6, 8, and -48. Let's try another one. Here we have the fact family for -9, -5, and 45. So once again, because we're more comfortable with multiplication, let's start there. How would we complete these two multiplication problems? -9 times -5 equals, and we're trying to figure out what that would be, and the reverse of those two factors, -5 times -9. Well, it falls under the same sign category, so we could say, well, it's two negative numbers, but we know it's going to be positive. It's in this fact family, so you're right. The answer is right there. -9 times a -5 is a +45. And the same is true if we switch around those factors. -5 times -9 is also +45. So we want to see if we can use these two facts to figure out the division problems. What do you think is the correct answers for these two sentences? 45 divided by -9 and 45 divided by -5. Go ahead and put in what answers you think, and let's see if we agree. Well, this problem right here, 45 divided by -9, is the this problem right here in reverse using backtracking. So 45 divided by -9 must equal -5, which would mean that 45 divided by -5 is the reverse of this problem right here. So the solution would be -9. 45 divided by -5 is equal to a -9. Are you starting to notice any patterns with division? Let's try a few more. Here's the next fact family I want us to work with. -12, 7, and -84. See if you can set up all four facts for the multiplication and division fact family using these three integers. Pause the video to do that, and then resume the video to see how we compare. Here would be the facts we would want to write, and now we just need to see if we agree. So we're going to start with the two multiplication problems. -12 times 7. Well, I would say that that's a -84. We're switching around those two factors doesn't change the answer, so a +7 times a -12 is also a -84. -84 divided by -12 will give us a +7. We backtrack this problem right here, and therefore -84 divided by 7 is equal to -12. Alright, let's try one last one. For our last fact family, we have -2, -14.5, and 29. So what are the four facts that we would use for multiplication and division fact families using these three numbers? Pause the video to go ahead and write down what you think they are and include your answers. How'd you do? You might have the problems in a slightly different order, but you should have the fact -2 times -14.5 is equal to 29. Switching the two factors around, -14.5 times -2 is also 29. 29 divided by -14.5 is going to equal a -2, and 29 divided by -2 is going to equal a -14.5, or -14.5. So these four examples, along with these patterns from multiplication, are going to conclude our video for today. But I would like you to think about this summary question. And in your summary, think about the practice that we did here and answer this question. Based on these fact families, what patterns or rules do you notice about division facts and how they relate to the multiplication patterns and rules? So are you finding any similarities or differences to the division fact patterns in comparison to the multiplication patterns and rules that we discussed at the beginning of this video? Make sure your notes are complete and come ready to do more problems like this in class.